Starting a new life in a new country is an intense experience. Continuing your career in that new country is even more so. A successful lawyer who's practiced law in India and now in Canada says you need to have a plan in place to find success. Shilpa Bhadoria shares her story of immigration and what newcomers should think about regarding legal services when they arrive in Canada. Let's get into it.
I'm Shilpa Bhadoria. I'm a lawyer, dual qualified. I was a lawyer back home in India for 15 years before moving to Canada. And then I started my practice in Canada in 2020, moved to Canada, and I completed my education, Canadian part of it, while I was working in India, Delhi. I was a legal head of India's biggest media company, which is Times Network. And then while doing that, one of my colleagues decided to move to Canada, and that's where he put that seed in my mind, and then just followed what he was doing and explored, and then moved. In 2019, I moved to Canada, and I've been here ever since. And I started practicing in 2020. That's my journey.
Every immigrant journey is fantastic and interesting from my perspective, that changing up your entire life, uplifting and moving somewhere else. I don't know if I'd want to do that myself. I think like building a new life, you have to build a new network of friends and everything like that. It's always inspiring to hear.
There were things back home we wanted to change. So we decided we are in for the struggle to accept the change. And we were well settled. We had our own house and we sold everything. It's difficult to move, uproot yourself and move. But we really needed that in life. So we decided we'll do it. And that's when we started, working towards it while we were there. And at least I did not move unless I had the qualification and ability to work here. And I moved when I knew that, okay, fine, I've qualified now. I can go and kind of settle in. So that's I took it slow. I came for a holiday first and then saw where I'm moving and felt the winter chill and everything. And that's when we decided to move. And then, we've been here ever since. We love it.
This winter's been quite manageable compared to some of the ones in the past. But that's an amazing story. That's a challenge that many newcomers and immigrants face sometimes. You took the time to make sure you were qualified when coming over so you could have a job and a position. A lot of people come over and then their qualifications aren't recognized. And how frustrating that must be to start completely from the ground floor again. It's like for someone who's like a doctor or something, it's like, well, I can't be a doctor here in Manitoba or Canada. It's like, what do you do at that point?
Yeah, the licensing process is stringent, so to say, and it takes time. So it's always advisable to plan your move beforehand and kind of plan that you will not be able to work in the profession that you've been working in while you're licensing. There are certain barriers like finding articling position in case lawyers, and I'm sure there must be similar things in other professions as well. So those are difficult to find because you are a qualified professional, but you're competing against students who've qualified from here. And they have their links and, they have their roots here, so they have the network to be able to get a position to qualify. While you are a newcomer, you don't know anybody. So yes, that's a challenge that you should plan for.
Practicing law in India versus practicing law here, what were some of the changes and things that you found you had to make, or what are some of the substantial differences that you've noticed?
World has increasingly become a global place, and corporations back home in India or in most countries now, corporations are multinationals, so they are doing intercontinental business. So law is the same. It's become intercountry most of the time. I was practicing in India and I was doing corporate laws. So my area of law was mostly international. So it was easy. The transition was easy because
it was stuff you're already used to.
I was already used to. There are a lot of multinational corporations from the America in India already there, and we service them there. Yes, if you are practicing law in areas like family law or something which is very local, and yes, there's a change in the law, but we are all common law jurisdictions, so we are all the same concepts. It's just that you have to reread everything again.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the change that you
So
have to
the
adapt yourself.
position you were in had a lot more flexibility in that transitional period.
Yes, it did. Maybe it's a good idea to do that in whichever profession you are, to make sure that you kind of grab things which are global and tune your skills to that.
Yeah, so there's not too much new to learn because it's already like you're already working with people in America or people in China. Like,
Exactly.
you're already working with anyone. So you can move to other places without too much to worry about.
Yeah, because when you make the move, you already have a lot to worry about. And if you add one more thing to that, makes it really hard. So it's all about planning and doing it stepwise and taking it slow. If you can. In some situations, you can't.
Of course. And like if someone like refugee or family emergencies or stuff like that, that's a completely different story.
But I think about 50-60% of the cases, people plan their move and are able to plan that, at least slow it down so that they can make it easy on themselves.
Why did you want to get into law in the first place? I mean, it's a very involved career. Very busy, highly competitive. It's not the type of work that everyone wants to do.
Interestingly, back home in India, law is an unusual career for a woman to take. It's also a difficult choice. So when I was growing up, I was, so to say, I wanted to break the barriers and I wanted to do something which was different culturally. And I was told by my own family, don't do law, please don't do law. Just take, it's conventionally back home, engineering and becoming a doctor is a more common line of career for everybody, most people. And your family kind of pushes you to that, and you and when you don't, I never wanted to do just those two things and something else. That led me to a little bit of exploring other careers and stuff like that. And that's how I landed up doing law.
Well, I mean, that's important, finding something that you're inspired to, passionate to pursue. Because, there's a lot of people that maybe they go down a career path because that's what their family wants, or that's the cultural or social norms that if you're within this sort of gender, these are the jobs that you should go. But if that's something you're not passionate about, that's going to be a very long, unfulfilling career.
Yes. And I really, truly believe that when you are growing up, and especially when you're in those formative years, it helps if you can assess and have some help with the assessment of what your inclination is, and somebody can introduce you to various forms. I really like the system of education in Canada that way, because you have the opportunity to kind of work in various fields and then make the decision.
Test the waters a little bit for getting involved. And I mean, hey, getting involved in things that aren't the norm, I think is great. More diversity within different areas is so key, because you bring in new ideas, new things. You might have an approach to something that someone who fits within the general demographic of that mold might not be thinking about, because, they're not challenged, they're not pushed, because it's like, oh yeah, I got in here because, you fit the standard. But someone who's coming out from the outside, you're pushing, you're hungry, you're inspired, so you have new ideas to bring to the table.
I come from a family of doctors, and I was pushed into medical field. I tried to study that for about 2 years, and I was like, too bad at it.
Different things for different people. Like, I mean, I'm not a math guy at all. I wouldn't want to do anything that required math. Numbers are an alien concept to me.
Same here. But I really liked, if I were not a lawyer, I would have been a journalist. I'm pretty sure about it.
Journalism is another thing that's, it takes a very specific type of person to want to get involved. I mean, there's not a lot of glam or glory within journalism, especially if you're trying to get some of those hard stories, especially if you're very critical of like governments or individuals, you're not making any friends.
And then I also think there's a lot of overlap between the two fields, because if you have the political, knowledge and also the ability to read the law and the legislations, because these are the things that frame the society and lead the society. So what's happening in the politics and how the politicians are framing the laws actually affect your daily lives, and you don't realize how much it does affects you. So yeah, I think if I wouldn't have been a lawyer, I would certainly be a...
I can see the overlaps between those two. You have to be able to read a situation, understand, break it down, and then you have to come in with your approach, your objectives to be like, okay, how do I tell this story towards, and I mean, law is so vast, like very different versions of how you need to approach a subject, but you have to understand like how can I get my objective forward, like my clients or things based on this information.
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree.
For someone who is in that transition process, and you've already talked about it a little bit, of trying to find a job here, specifically within law, and you've changed kind of your focus of what you're approaching in law as well, from corporate and media to more real estate and areas like that.
Yeah, family and real estate and wills and estates, and that's my area. But also corporate law. I also do business,
you still do it, yes.
Business sale, purchase, and transactions.
What sort of advice would you give people who are looking to make that big shift, specifically from that kind of law perspective?
Within the legal, dimension, if you're changing your practice area, it's not so much of a change. Mm-hmm. It's not so much, and it's easy to find your inclination and your liking, and it comes from practice. When you start practicing law, when you're doing a little bit of this, little bit of that, and then you start liking one area of law, and you kind of develop that expertise over the time, because you start doing that kind of work more. Mm-hmm. So it's a gradual process, and it comes to you automatically. I wouldn't suggest anything on that. I would say just go by where the path takes you and where you yourself lead yourself. Mm-hmm. It has to be fluid.
So there's much more freedom in terms of that career than potentially other ones.
Absolutely.
Why did you want to make that shift, coming back to yourself, focusing also on family law, estates? Why did you want to make that slight shift? I mean, you're still doing business,
yes,
but you've changed things over a little bit.
Yes.
And you're focusing more on a private practice now?
That's right. I was in a corporate job, and I did corporate law for a very long time. And I decided, my daughter was born, and it was also driven by need for flexibility. So my daughter was born. I needed the flexibility to be able to manage my time. Now, when you are in a 9-to-5, you can't do that. So I decided to take the plunge and, have my own office and practice law independently. The need pushed me, but then I liked it so much that I decided this is for me, this is for life. And now I'm just going to do that.
I mean, the flexibility and freedom is nice, right?
Yes, exactly. That's what drove me to practice. Now, when you are practicing independently, your practice is also driven by the kind of work that comes to you. The demand and the supply is also another thing. So when you start working on client files that are in a particular area, you develop that expertise and you start liking it, or you don't like it and then you give it up if you don't like it. But I happen to like it and I just pursued it.
And then it's about developing your clients, developing
exactly.
the list, kind of building from there.
So with every case, every matter that you do, you go deeper into it, you develop that expertise even more. And it's about just number of years you spend.
And it's not unusual to see lawyers change kind of the area that they're practicing. There's this one guy who did, helping people get out of like court dates and stuff like that. No, that's probably not right. I'm misremembering the thing. But he transitioned more to like elder abuse. Mm-hmm. Law, finding like, there's a lot of people passionate about it, and there's a demand for it. So I guess it's for someone who's looking to potentially look at independence or things like that. It's like, as you're mentioning, see what options are out there. See, what kind of sparks your interest. See, what you're good at, and you have that flexibility to try those things.
Absolutely. So for the only barrier for entering the legal profession is the licensing. Once you are licensed, you have no barriers. You can easily switch between the practice areas.
If you're licensed, then you can go through with any of the other areas.
Absolutely, you can.
All encompassing.
As long as you're willing to put in the time and the effort to develop that expertise, you can do that.
What is that licensing process like? I mean, I don't know what it's like at all here in Canada for becoming a lawyer. What are those processes to get that license?
You have to get yourself, if you're already a qualified lawyer in a foreign jurisdiction, you have to submit your mark sheets to the NCA, the Federation of Law Societies in Canada, and have your degrees or the law degree that you have overseas assessed.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of assess your mark sheets and your degree to see how much it matches with the Canadian education system. Based on that, they ask you to give certain number of exams. It may be 5, it may be 7, it may be 10 in specific subjects. You're required to clear those exams. And then once you have qualified those exams, you have to go through the bar licensing process. Here in Manitoba, it's called the CPLED. It's a 1-year program, or I think now it's even shorter. They have a fast track program for 3 years. Back when I did it, it was a 9-month program. And then once you've done that, at the end of it, there's an exam. You basically give another exam to license, and then you have to complete your training, which is your articling, as you call it, under another lawyer. So that is a barrier. The finding the articling position is another major barrier after you've cleared all your exams and everything, because there is a shortage of that, and you are basically competing against students who qualified from locally and have connections.
So very competitive.
It's very, very competitive, and it takes time, lots of social skills to be able to, market yourself and find a foot. And once that is cleared, then you can start practicing here in Manitoba.
Wow. I mean, you definitely have to be dedicated to go through all of that effort.
It takes time, but if you really like what you're doing, you would do it. So yeah, it takes time and a lot of planning to do that.
If the desire's there, people will be able to go through and find something that they're good at and inspired to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you juggle the balls. You kind of find another, if you can't afford to just study during that period, you kind of find another job and you do that. And in my case, I was already working back home in India, and I used to and I was in Delhi. Luckily, the NCA conducts all these exams even in Delhi.
That makes it much more convenient.
It's very convenient. So there are a few locations across the globe where they conduct the exams. So you are able to kind of, if you're not in one of those locations, you can go to to whichever one is closest to you and give those exams. But you still have to come back to Canada to complete your licensing process and your articling. So yeah, but then you're already halfway through by the time you land.
Yeah, you're already through that process. Okay, not bad at all. Let's look a little bit from the perspective of newcomers or immigrants coming to Canada, landing here, and needing a lawyer for something, for family law, housing, estate planning, stuff like that. What are some key things that newcomers, regardless of what country they're moving from, should be thinking about when they come here and they're starting to go through those legal steps, building their life here?
I think the first thing that you come and land here and you want to look for is a home. So you kind of, and the process here is that once you identify the property that you want to invest in, you need a lawyer to go through that sale. I think that's one of the things that they need a lawyer for. Another thing is after you acquire the home, you kind of need to protect your kids, your family, and have a will. That's another important thing to do.
I think that's something a lot of native-born Canadians should be thinking about as well.
Yeah. And then if you're not into a job or something, you're also looking at investing in a business. So you want to buy a business. I think that's what you need a lawyer for. So these are setting yourself up every step of the way, whichever applies to you.
And I mean, in that process, when you're looking for a lawyer, from that perspective, someone who is an immigrant themselves might be a great fit because they understand, some of the things and requirements that you need when moving to a new country.
Absolutely. For petty things like notarizations, etc. Of course, you need a lawyer. So it's all as you go along. So you need lawyers for a lot of things.
If you were to have what would be your dream case / dream client? Is there one that you'd be like, this would be so much fun or so interesting to do that I would love to add this sort of circumstance to my portfolio?
Personally, I love working on files where, people are growing and have that passion towards doing business, and they want to acquire something and they want to make sure they're safe. I love doing that part of I love that part of my practice. Help them set up and identify the right investment, help them through handhold, especially when somebody's moved and they're looking to set up a new life. Because, family law is my practice area, but unfortunately, it's always a breakdown of the family or separation or child custody.
It can be very emotionally tolling.
Absolutely. So I would pick that. Setting up a business, that's what I like to help people with.
Well, then you get to see it flourish. And I mean, even if it doesn't succeed at the end of the day, you were there to help someone through building that business.
Absolutely. And then at the end of the day, it's all about growth and bright future in a country where you've just decided to move.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure having you come down to the studio, talk with us. And we're more than excited to have you come on and talk about some other topics. For some future segments on Newcomer Network or other shows, what are some things that you would like to talk about that people might be interested in tuning in to hear about?
I think family law could be one of those, because it's difficult for people to navigate the differences between the system.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a lot of laws which are just specific to Canada and rules that you have to follow.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that could be an interesting area. And then wills and estate.
I mean, I'm excited to learn a little bit more about those in the future. So for those listening, make sure you watch more from You Multicultural to learn more about law in the future.
Yes, absolutely.
Where can people go to find out more about yourself and your practice?
You can Google me. I'm on Darcy Deacon's website. Darcy Deacon LLP is the law firm I practice with. So you can look me up on their website. I also have my own webpage, so you can go through that. All my contact details and everything is there.
Have any stories you'd like us to share or communities we should highlight? Leave a comment on our social media or reach out to us on our website. I'm Ryan Funk. This was You Talk, and have yourself a good one.